My name is Christina McClellan, and I'm a woman at Iowa.
The Chief Curator at the University of Iowa Museum of Art, and I'm a woman at Iowa.
Gigi Durham. I'm an Associate Professor in the School of Journalism, and I'm a woman at Iowa.
Welcome to the 4th season of UITV's Women at Iowa, which explores the amazing women who have been active and influential on the University of Iowa campus. I'm your host, Jessica Danca, and today we have Kari Thompson, who is a TA in the Department of Religion Studies. She's also a graduate student and the current president of UE 896, Campaign to Organize Graduate Students Union. Thank you so much for being with us today, Kari.
Thanks for having me.
So, to jump right in, for those of us who don't really know what COGS is, can you explain further what the organization does for graduate students?
Absolutely. So COGS stands for the Campaign to Organize Graduate Students, and it started in 1996. That was when we first affiliated as a union, and we are the union for the teaching and research assistants and other graduate assistants here at the University of Iowa. And that means that we negotiate over the contract that governs our wages, health insurance, paid leave, other types of benefits every 2 years with the Board of Regents and the university. They have a combined bargaining team. And that contract lasts for 2 years. We're on our 8th contract now, and we've made some significant changes over the last 15 years to the lives of graduate employees here at the university, really improve the quality of living, and that has made our work that we do here that much better. So I serve as president of the union, but there's a full complement of other officers and committee chairs that make sure the union runs well. And one thing that's unique about our union, as opposed to a lot of other unions, is that we're really a member-run union. So I'm the president, but I don't get paid for that. It's just a volunteer job. I am primarily a teaching assistant. That's what my job is, and all the other people who are officers and chairs of various committees are also teaching and research assistants or graduate assistants of some kind here at the university. So we really do the work of the union, and we are also the people that benefit from the contract and that work.
So how long have you been a part of this union?
I joined pretty much right away when I got to the University of Iowa in fall of 2006. And I've been serving in this capacity as president for 2 years. This is my 2nd year.
So what exactly are your duties? Like, what do you have to do on a day-to-day basis to be president?
More of a week-to-week, not necessarily day-to-day. I don't always have responsibilities, but the president is the spokesperson for the union, so whenever there are questions from the public, I'm the person who answers those for the most part, unless it's about specific work that somebody else did, and then we pass it off to them. I am the person who organizes all of these other people who are helping to make sure the union is running smoothly. So I'm involved with the organizing that we do to make sure people know about the contract and the benefits they have, and also to encourage people to actually become members of COGS. Since here in Iowa we're a right-to-work state, that means that people aren't automatically a member of the union. They have to choose whether or not they want to be a member, and so a lot of our work just has to do with educating the graduate employees about the benefits of having a union here on campus. And then I also just do some things around the office, correspondence. I keep in touch with our national union, which is UE, the United Electrical, Radio, and Machine Workers of America. And I have, various things that I do for them to time. I'm working on a pamphlet with them right now, and I'm also a member of the Western region. Our national union is divided into 3 regions. I'm a member of the Western Region Executive Council Board, which just occasionally has to make some decisions about financial issues or other matters in addition to just sort of regular meetings. So the person who's COGS president usually has a seat on that board.
So are you involved in any other organizations or anything else besides just all of those things?
In my capacity as COGS president, or just in general on campus?
Just in general on campus.
So The department that I am a student in, the Department of Religious Studies, has a graduate student organization, and I have been participating in that for many years now. I'm currently the representative for the American Academy of Religion, which is our just sort of parent academic organization. I just sort of help remind people about when deadlines for conferences and things are coming up for that organization. So that's not quite as big a role as the things I've been doing for COGS. And in the past, I've done things like the Graduate Student Senate as well.
So today and in your past, you've obviously been involved in a lot of, extracurricular activities. Were there any from your past that inspired you to become part of the ones that you're actively a part of now?
There aren't very many things that directly lead up to being the president of a union. That's not something that I imagined when I was younger. But there are things that definitely help me in this capacity. And the biggest one of those is that I was in theater for a really long time as a child. And I think that really helps me when I am speaking in front of audiences or doing an interview like this one, to have composure, to be able to think on my feet. And it also is something that helps people feel empathy for different kinds of people. You play a character that's very different from the way you live your life, and you learn a lot about different things through the performance of theater. I also did lots of other things like swimming and speech and debate and a lot of other activities like that. But I think theater is the one that's played the biggest role in my life later on.
So has anything from your past inspired you towards your future aspirations?
I guess I'm not sure about that. You gonna ask that question again?
Yeah, sure. So has anything inspired you? Oh, sorry, again, we're gonna do it again. So what's influenced you in your future aspirations?
Go ahead and read that question one more time.
Okay.
So just pick it up from there.
Okay. So what influenced you in your future aspirations?
The work that I've been doing with the union has definitely motivated me to look beyond just traditional academic jobs in terms of where I want to go in the future. I think it's really important to think about engagement with the community and not just necessarily, the isolated ivory tower. So that's definitely been something that's been really important for me. And I've met lots of different people through the union who do a lot of different types of jobs all over the country, whether it's manufacturing or laundering uniforms, or people who are social workers, all sorts of different kinds of jobs. That's really given me a better appreciation for the lives of working people in this country. And I hope that in the future I can help be part of, a world that continues to improve the lives of working people and gives working people a say over their working conditions.
So has anything from your childhood influenced you to become a part of the Department of Religion Studies?
I, as a kid, was really interested in religion from a pretty young age. I come from a family with a mixed religious background. And so pretty early on, I started asking my parents questions about what does it mean to belong to one religion or another. And that's where my curiosity about religion first started. Since then, I have certainly gained a more academic, knowledge of a lot of different types of religions, both here in the United States and also in other parts of the world. And I really think that learning about people's religions is a great way to understand what motivates people beyond just economics or the weather or something like that. That, religions really are pretty powerful for people who are strong believers of them. And by understanding where people are coming from and certain tenets of their religions, we can approach potential areas of conflict or places where there are other people who also, have similar ideas and try to kind of just create better community situations.
So you had told me that you had an aunt that went to the Texas Women's University.
She was a professor there. Mm-hmm.
Yes. And I was just wondering if you could maybe tell our audience a little bit more about her work there.
Yeah, my aunt's name was Joyce Thompson. and she was a really remarkable woman. She taught at Texas Women's University, just north of the Dallas-Fort Worth area for many, many years. She passed away when I was a young kid, but even before then, she was very influential in my life. So she was a professor of English, but she was actually an early participant in conversations about women's studies, this idea that, women have a place in the conversation that's different and that has been overlooked in the past when academia has been dominated by men. And I think being at a school that's primarily focusing on women students is something that certainly helped her towards that. She wrote a really wonderful book called Ladies First that has all sorts of different places where women were, the first woman who flew an airplane or the first woman to graduate from a medical school, and just sort of highlighting the women in history who have done really wonderful things that have also often been overlooked, and they were certainly challenging for them because they were the first women to accomplish those things. So knowing about those sorts of things was definitely an inspiration for me, and my aunt definitely encouraged me to be curious very early on. I have a memory of going to an art museum with her, so even though that wasn't something that was her specialty, she wanted me to appreciate all different aspects of culture, and having somebody who worked in academia was definitely something that made me think about pursuing graduate school when I was in college as well.
Speaking of graduate school, what initially brought you to come to the University of Iowa?
So the way graduate school works is you usually have to pick out several programs that you think might fit in for you. And the University of Iowa was one that I looked at and applied to, and it was one of a couple that I got into. And so when I was comparing which schools I would want to go to, I decided to go to Iowa in part because the funding package was a lot better than it is at a lot of other schools, and that's because of the union, even though I didn't necessarily know that at the time. And because there were some faculty members that I wanted to work with, and also that when I came for a visit, the other graduate students in the department were really friendly and really welcoming, and that's not something that happens in every graduate department. So I really appreciated that there was a sense of camaraderie among the graduate students.
So what had made you want to become a TA also on top of being a graduate student?
So the teaching assistant job is one that is just the primary source of funding for most graduate students on the campus. In other departments, there are research assistant jobs. Just sort of depends on the specific area of focus. But my department is mainly a teaching department, and so that was my funding offer. So into the classroom I went, and I definitely learned a lot very quickly about teaching.
So in Arkansas, you got your bachelor's in religion with distinction at Hendrix College. Were you involved there in any other activities like you are now here at the university?
I did a lot of different things at Hendrix. I wrote for the student newspaper for a little while. There was also a club for majors of religion at Hendrix College, and that was a really great thing to think about different ways that we can explain the work that we do studying religion in an academic setting to a broader audience in our sort of academic community. And so we would do things like a religion and the arts conference where we would just show different visual art, also performance art from different religions, or maybe influenced by different religions, not even actually from those specific traditions. So that definitely helped me think creatively about how to share work on religion. And then I was also I was a member of the dance ensemble at Hendrix College, and I don't necessarily do that now, but it's something that I still enjoy going to watch, and I really appreciate being part of a university community that has a great dance program, and I can go and see some of those performances from time to time.
So I know you're initially from Texas. Mm-hmm. Was there a huge contrast between there and living in Iowa now?
I think the biggest contrast is the weather. I think that one's pretty obvious. Much hotter there, especially I lived in South Texas, so very hot down there, and definitely not the kind of winters that we get up here in Iowa, though this winter has been pretty mild. But I don't mind because I really like the cold weather. I think the other thing that's really different is the diversity in ethnicity and languages that you find because of the immigrant population from Mexico and other parts of Latin America. So the high school that I went to was about 90% Latino, Latina, because it was right on the border with Mexico, and that's just the way the families had moved and the way life was. So I actually didn't think about that a lot at the time. I didn't really realize that I was living in a place that would be considered diverse in other parts of the country. It's just where I lived, you know? But once I moved, then I sort of came to appreciate the unique situation that I had been a part of and some of the unique cultural events that I was exposed to living in South Texas. But there are also just a lot of similarities. I mean, Texas and Iowa are both agricultural states, different types of agriculture, but still that's something that's really important for a lot of folks. And, you know, also the mix of really conservative and more liberal, progressive political views are also in both places. Texas is known as more of a conservative place, but there are pockets, just like Iowa City, there are pockets like that in Texas as well, where there are people who are interested in some more progressive sorts of political views.
So going back to the University of Iowa, do you have any favorite part of your involvement in your organizations and the work that you do?
I definitely think my favorite part of being involved in COGS is all the different people that I meet. So here at the university, I meet people who do all sorts of different kinds of work. So there are people in education that I have met who do interesting, creative things about thinking about the problems in our educational system as it exists right now, or people who are working over in pharmacy who are working on drugs that can be really beneficial for people in the future, and then, you know, people who do things a little closer to work that I do, maybe people in anthropology who go do ethnographic studies that are really fascinating. So that's wonderful. But then I also get to meet other people from very different backgrounds, as I was sort of alluding to, from all different walks of life. And recently, I was actually able to go to Mexico as part of a delegation from my national union, UE, that was participating in a set of talks and press events for something called the Tri-National Solidarity Alliance. So there are unions from Canada, the United States, and Mexico who are really pushing this agenda of allowing workers to have a say in their working and living conditions and trying to help each other, even though the situations in all three countries are pretty different. But with NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, there's also a lot of things that are pretty similar, a lot of jobs that were once in one place that are now in another. And so meeting those people and understanding the problems in these different environments was really interesting to me. I really learned a lot. And I met some amazing women down in Mexico City who are doing some great work in the labor movement there that is very different from some of the things that we have to deal with here, in part because of the machismo culture that exists in Mexico. And yet they're still doing it because women are just as much bread earners in Mexico as they are in the United States, Canada, or elsewhere, and they need those protections that workers get, as you know, just as much as in Mexico as they do in other places. So there was a lawyer named Patty who she was just this amazing woman and fairly young, but she'd seen some crazy things already, and she was a lawyer, but she doesn't really make a lot of money because of the type of law that she works in, and she also faces dangers that most lawyers here in the United States wouldn't face because the union situation in Mexico is so difficult. But this is something I never would have been exposed to if I hadn't been working for COGS. And the situation for COGS as a graduate employee union, as part of this union that was originally mostly trade workers, is really unique. And I think it's wonderful that our national union values us as academic workers, that they recognize that we're different from a lot of the other people in the national union, and yet we still also, are really important to contributing to the conversation of solving problems and helping advance the cause of workers' rights.
Another cause that's been brought up lately in Iowa City is the Occupy Iowa City. Do you have any thoughts on the whole situation?
Yeah, things have really evolved, and I'm really proud that so many people in Iowa City, were inspired by the Occupy movement. I think that it's really done a lot to push people to really think about the situation of people in our country and the wealth disparity that exists and has existed for a long time, and yet people were ignoring what the situation really was. So, I think it's important to bring that conversation here, just as it's been important for that to happen all over the country, and for it to come to address issues that are important here in our city. I think one of the things that people at the Occupy Iowa City movement came to learn is that the situation for homeless people in Iowa City is pretty difficult. I think there are a lot of people who originally came to the Occupy movement that were not thinking about that issue at all, and yet it's something that ties in directly to problems with wealth disparity, with greed of people who do have a lot of money, and of problems with a healthcare system that doesn't necessarily provide for people who can't pay up front. And that's not an issue that was first and foremost in people's minds when Occupy Iowa City started, but people learned a lot, I think, as the movement progressed. So I think it's going to be really interesting to see what happens this spring, both here in Iowa City and nationally, to the Occupy movement.
All right, so now we're going to move on to a more women's aspect. How do you feel being a woman has positively affected you in your life?
I've had a lot of really great women role models. In addition to the aunt that I mentioned, my mom has held a variety of different jobs and has really demonstrated to me that, you don't have to have any limitations on what you do in life because you're a woman. And I have heartily embraced that, and I've never really felt that I, had to stop at some particular point because I'm a woman and I couldn't move forward with certain types of activities or something like that. But I think, just in general, that, women have different issues from men, and I think it's important for women and women's voices to be heard in conversations. I think that has happened pretty recently in the political realm. People have sort of realized that there are issues that everyone has an opinion on, and everyone should be part of the conversation. But that also includes women, and when women are excluded from conversations about themselves, it creates really awkward tensions. So I guess I just enjoy being able to be a positive person who is also a woman, and just allowing that to be part of who I am.
So can you recall back to any moments in your life where you thought it was more of a feminist moment?
Ever since we started talking about this interview, I've been thinking about that question, and there have definitely been moments in my life where somebody said something to me or did something and looked at me a certain way, and I felt objectified in a way that I didn't appreciate. But those sorts of negative things happen to a lot of people, and they aren't necessarily something that I want to dwell on, for purposes of speaking about the way women can actually be strong leaders. But I think one thing that has actually been really positive for me was actually my decision to shave my head. I did that in the summer of 2008, and I just did it just to see what would happen. And I, didn't even know if I would keep it all summer long. And as it turns out, it was actually one of the most empowering things I've ever done for myself. I think it's helped me recognize beauty in a different way, both in myself, but also in other people who maybe have lost their hair for less intentional reasons. And I think it's wonderful to be able to go out in public and encourage other people, for them to reconsider what they think of as beautiful. But there's also, there are moments in public when I can tell people are looking at me, and that at first was a little jolting and somewhat uncomfortable. But I've come to just sort of ignore most of those reactions for the most part now, just knowing that it's making those people question their assumptions about this person that they saw. They don't know anything about who I am other than that I have a shaved head. And so if they want to get to know me, then they can choose to do that, and sometimes it leads to some interesting conversations. I think it's really wonderful when kids see me, because that's, a lot of children are not used to seeing women with shaved heads, but just, it's just another hairstyle, and I think it's great to be able to be a part of helping people question their assumptions about women and how, women are supposed to act in our world.
So, for your last question, we had you think about a book recommendation. Have you given any thoughts?
I'd like to make 2 if I can.
That is fine.
The first is actually a book that's been my favorite book since I was a kid. It has really very little to do with women at all. It's The Little Prince by Antoine de Saint-Exupéry, and it's a children's book. It's very short, but I think it has some wonderful lessons about life and about how people interact with each other and about what's really important in life, what kinds of relationships people should value, and valuing creativity. So I think that's a wonderful book for anybody to read. But there's another book that if people are interested more in the work of our union, of UE, my parent union, that people might be interested in reading. It's called Them and Us by James Matlis and James Higgins, I believe. And it's really the history of UE, our parent union. And COGS isn't even in it. It was written well before we were a union. But it really gives some insight into the priorities of our union and why we're unique. There are particular stories about women's struggles and women's activism in our union from very early on, and also about our push as a union to embrace people of all different ethnicities and people from all different types of work, and to not cast judgment upon whether or not people wanted to be leaders just, because they maybe were doing a type of work that was seen as less skilled, or because they were Latino. It's a really inclusive union, and I think reading that book is one way for people to appreciate that inclusivity.
Well, thank you so much for being with us today, Kari.
Thank you.
I appreciate you coming, and I'm sure our audience does too.
Thanks.
Thank you.